Hey paisanos, it is I, Mickey Saturn, and it's kind of late where I am, so if I seem a little groggy, it's because it's late, but I made a reference in that other video I made, that no one's watched yet, to making a video about the Xbox reveal, and I wanted to go ahead and do that, and not be any later than I could be, so I wanted to try to do it tonight. I didn't want to rush it, so I gave myself some time to think about it all and let it kind of sink in, see what I really thought. And I guess when it was going on, like when it first started, and I was watching it, I was sort of struck by just this sort of like firm realization that I am really not their audience. And it was, I almost had this feeling of like acceptance or something, like it's okay, I guess, it's okay Microsoft, I guess you don't have to make it for me, and I don't have to buy it. And that was sort of my initial reaction, and that's still basically the way I feel. It's almost like they've gone so far away from what I'm interested in as a gamer that it's like, okay, whatever. I don't know why I even pay attention to what you're doing anymore. And I mean, okay, so for context, I've always been someone who's had like every console, and this is really the first generation, this upcoming generation, where I'm starting to feel like I probably am not going to have every console. In fact, I may not even have more than one. It just depends, I guess. But I don't know. I'm just sort of observing in this interesting way the way gaming is changing, and I feel like the way Microsoft handled this reveal like exemplifies that in kind of an interesting way. And I made an effort to be as open-minded as possible and try to not, I guess I felt before the event maybe a little bit of a predisposition to be anti-Microsoft, and so I've spent like the whole event and immediately afterwards I was trying to kind of curb that and see if I couldn't be as fair-minded as possible, and give them a chance, to make their case. And having watched the event, I feel like I say, like my initial thought is, it's just not for me. So what have we got here? Microsoft has always kind of talked about wanting to dominate the living room and be the kind of center device of your whole like entertainment center, and they have really pushed that here. It's almost all they talked about. They barely mentioned games. I don't think they even mentioned the first game until like half an hour in. And I was most interested in the games, but I also understand that E3 is just a couple weeks away, and they, I think, were deliberately holding off on talking about the biggest games for E3, and maybe that makes sense as like a tactical decision, like all the gamers are going to be watching E3, but this event was the chance maybe to get the attention of media and press that was beyond gaming. So it's kind of like, well, maybe it made sense not to go on and on about games. But that only makes sense if the thing you're making isn't a game console. And that's basically where I'm at. Like, I feel like saying, we shouldn't call this a game console. This is not a video game console. This is like a media entertainment center that also plays games. And that's a totally different thing. Like, that totally changes everything, including like whether or not I care about it. Oh shit. Knocking the table around. Anyway, it changes everything, like whether or not I care about it, for example, and whether or not I have any intention of buying it. And I just feel like the things that they actually showed us didn't there goes the screensaver again. Things that they actually showed us didn't really encourage me at all. So what did they show us? I mean, they went on and on initially about Kinect, talked a bit about smart glass, and I feel like one they emphasize how technologically advanced the new Kinect was, and they talked at length about the ability of the system to like multitask, and you could like switch between all these different things, switch between TV and games and movies and internet, and you use the Kinect to do this because you can like speak to it. So you say Xbox, watch TV, and it goes to TV. Xbox, show me my games. It shows you games, and so that's what they basically spent like the first half an hour talking about. Then they trotted out some guy from Electronic Arts to talk about how they were going to have like a lot of sports games on the Xbox. Go figure. And then they did do a reveal of an unknown game, Quantum Break, I believe it was called, and that trailer was the least informative trailer I've ever seen. I have literally no idea what that is, but I did see a boat crash into like a bridge, like a drawbridge or something that didn't rise up. So it looks like some kind of pseudo-apocalyptic thing, and that I feel like is par for the course for a Microsoft exclusive. So wonderful, like there's nothing. For as far as I could tell so far, I didn't see anything interesting about that, really. And then they, what did they do immediately after that? I forget if they went straight into talking about the NFL, but they talked about, like, they're having some partnership with the NFL. I kind of glossed over that a little bit. I kind of spaced out when they started talking about their NFL and their fantasy league. Oh, they talked about Skype. Well, wonderful. I can Skype with my Xbox. This is great. I don't already have a machine that can Skype. I'm sure the $500 I'm going to spend on the Xbox is going to great use. I didn't even mention the name. XBox1. XBox1. Like, as in, we are the one. This is the one. Mr. Anderson. I mean, that's got to be what they meant by that, right? Because it's obviously the third Xbox, so it's not actually Xbox One. It's it's Xbox 3. Geez, to me that's just beyond stupid. But I'm trying to be fair-minded. So, in the interest of being fair-minded, I don't know really that it's any stupider than everybody else's name. I mean, PlayStation 4, that's real creative. Wii U, do I even need to say anything? So, whatever. And in the same way, even though I don't give a crap about Kinect, being fair-minded, if I can, as best as I can, I appreciate that Kinect can be used in some interesting ways potentially. So, voice recognition and stuff could be used in real games, and even the motion stuff, if you keep it kind of simple and gestural, could be used in games. Like if you wanted to say that doing this versus this or something could signal your squad or something to do something in some squad-based game or something like that, I can see how you could do that. I don't really like the idea of actually clearing out the room and standing and waving my arms around or whatever, unless it's just a goofy thing like Double Fine Action Theater or something. But they actually said that it was so sensitive that it could detect your heart. And I immediately thought of Valve and all their biofeedback stuff, and I thought about how being able to monitor the player's heart rate could help you if you were making like a survival horror game, to kind of keep the game could like procedurally react. If the player's heart rate was too mellow, you would be able to know that you weren't effectively scaring this player right now. so there's like intelligent ways that you could use that information, and since the system won't even work without the Kinect attached, is one thing we learned. We know that developers will know that every machine will have that, and they can build their games around that if they're prepared to make their game like exclusive to the system, which is a whole story unto itself as to whether or not that'll ever be the case again. But anyway, so there was that. But otherwise, okay, well, I should say, they did talk, before I go into more analysis, let me finish summarizing the event. They got Steven Spielberg out there, and they talked about how they're making a Halo TV series. And I guess this is like exclusive to the Xbox, so you have to watch it via Xbox Live or something. And that, honestly, almost more than anything, really summarizes the sort of shift away from a game-centric machine. Because it's one thing to say, since we have an online infrastructure, Xbox Live, we will allow online services, Netflix, Hulu, to use it to distribute their service or something, and we get a take of that or something. To me, that was already kind of muddying the waters of your machine in a way that I don't like. I prefer a series of more sort of dedicated devices, but that's just me. I guess I'm old-fashioned like that. But when you are actively producing television shows for your online service, and this is like one of your major selling points, that you like make a big deal out of it, it's like, you're not a game company, are you? You're just like an entertainment company, right? And games are just one of the things you do. Microsoft is a game company, and the Xbox One is a game machine to the same degree that Apple is a game company and the iPad is a game machine. It's like, there are games on the iPad, but you wouldn't say the iPad is a great game machine, Well, some people might say that, but I would never say that. It's a multi-purpose device that just happens to have some games on it, and a handful of them are good, and most of them aren't. I just think we can really see the shift here. And then, after that, they did a whole thing about Call of Duty for like the rest of the conference. Call of Duty Ghosts, it's more Call of Duty. It was really funny when the guy came out. What was his name? The guy from Activision. It wasn't Kotick, but it was the some other guy. And he's like, we could have done the easy and expected thing and made Modern Warfare 4. But we didn't want to do the easy and expected thing. We want to do the right thing. And the right thing is not just putting another number on the end of our successful franchise. It's changing the whole subtitle. That's right. We have a whole new subtitle for this game. That's the right thing to do. Honest to God. You can't make this shit up, It's like... Oh dear. Anyway, okay, that's what happened. And you may have seen people all over the internet freaking out. Let's talk about what didn't happen. We didn't get hardcore specs. 8 gigs of RAM, but they didn't tell us at the event what type of RAM. It's now been confirmed, I think, to be DDR3 RAM, I think, which is not the better RAM that the PS4 has. 8-core processor, but they didn't give us the speed, which you have to wonder why not, right? Are they don't want us to know? It's underwhelming or something? 500 gigabyte hard drive, you can't change it. So if you need more storage, you just need to attach an external drive, just like the Wii U, except the Wii U only has a 32 gigabyte flash memory instead of a hard drive. But same kind of thing, like it cannot be tampered with. It just is installed in the machine. And speaking of which, games require an installation. They come with like an activation code. There was a lot of confusion about, did this mean it was blocking used games? The answer is sort of. It's very unclear, because at first what I was hearing was, well, there was a fee to activate a used game. And then what I heard is, no, there's no fee. You just have to buy a license off of Xbox Live. It's the same price as the full retail game. So someone could give you the disc, and you could install all the little bits and pieces off of the disc, but in order to use it, you have to buy a license. That was the second thing I heard, and that made sense. I couldn't understand how the other thing was going to work. It wasn't very clear anyway, but that made more sense. But then that's supposedly been shot down. The latest thing I've heard is that Microsoft is saying that there will be some kind of retail used game option, but they're not talking about exactly how that's going to work. So I don't know how that's going to work. And they said that if you want to bring the game over to your friend's house, you can do that and things like that. But the catcher is, the way the guy said it made it sound like you could do that, but only if you logged in under your profile. So it's more like the game is tied to your profile, and your profile is like in the cloud or something. So any Xbox you could access your profile from, and that's how you could play your game at a friend's house. Because the discs, very clearly here what we're seeing is the move to discs that are simply a delivery system, no different from downloading. It's just a matter of how big the game files are going to be, that they're not making you download everything and having no disk drive at all. That's obviously the future that Microsoft is going towards, and probably the whole industry. As a collector of games, it's appalling. There's no value to Xbox games, Xbox One games. They're not real games. You can't collect them. I mean, what are you collecting here? I don't know. I guess you could collect them in theory. They're still a thing, but the actual game is not on the thing you're collecting, So, when I have a collection of NES games, I mean, they're still fucking games. I can plug them into the NES and play them, and that's not going to be true of these Xbox games. So why would you collect them? It's like, this is the death of game collecting. Right here for this machine. I already don't have any interest in ever doing that. What else have we got here? The other thing is online. There were all these always online rumors, and Microsoft's come out and said, no, it's not always online. It'll work when it's not online, but it has to go online every 24 hours. So the system will not stay operational if it ever goes more than 24 hours without connecting to the internet. Is that any better than always online? I guess so. I mean, I guess if your internet just goes down for a temporary time, at least then you're not affected. But to me, I routinely disconnect my systems from my router just because it doesn't have enough ports for everything I have, sometimes for weeks and weeks, and then I'll plug them back in, and you won't be able to do that with this device. It will quit working at all. So that's unfortunate in my opinion. It's just another thing I don't want to deal with, to add to the list. And, it's... I don't know, Paisanos. It's just... Microsoft's just going in a totally different direction, And I was watching it, and I was thinking... It got me thinking about something I think about from time to time anyway, which is how gaming has changed. I think I was kind of touching on this earlier when I said... I think I mentioned this earlier in this very video. I already can't remember what I was saying, like 10 minutes ago. But basically, when I was younger and when I was into gaming, it was like this relatively unified, I felt, niche subculture. We all liked pretty much the same stuff. And people did argue about Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis or whatever, but I think actually if you'd gotten anyone to really talk honestly, they would have told you that having both of them is what you wanted. And I did have both, and I liked them both, and there were good games on both of them. And that's how it's always been, until maybe like 10 years ago. And then gaming has shifted to become so mainstream that being a part of gaming is like it doesn't have any meaning in and of itself anymore. And what I was sort of becoming acutely aware of watching this is that Microsoft is really channeling like this whole element of gaming culture that I really can't stand, that I see it as sort of like a frat boy jock kind of culture thing, you know? Like, who is this machine for? I'm trying to figure, and I feel like the answer to that is this machine is for people who buy like 5 or 6 games in a year, and it's the same 6 games every year. They buy the new Call of Duty, they buy the new Madden, they buy NCAA football or something, they buy an NBA game, they buy like one other game or something that's something different, and then they do that again next year. You know, I knew those guys. I mean, I knew people like that in college, and I think they've really grown. That's the segment of the industry that's growing. That's where like the new money is for consoles. Obviously, the mobile industry is different, but people who are more like of a more kind of nerd culture persuasion, we've already been here ever since. I mean, forever. So we're like a static segment of the industry, and so as games become more mainstream, our relative influence in the industry declines. We're like a smaller and smaller percentage of the total pie, and it becomes more and more important to service this other group of people who, you know, would not be, you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly. It's like they wouldn't even be into gaming without the legwork that we put into it initially, making it awesome. I don't know. I'm not trying to sound as... I feel like I'm coming across as more elitist than I'm meaning to be. But there is something kind of going on there. Like, they literally talked about nothing I care about. Like, they went on and on about being able to check your fantasy football league stuff. Like, that was a big deal that would really appeal to people. And I'm like... Are there a lot of gamer sports fans? I mean, yeah, apparently, right? Because Madden sells a whole ton of copies, so I guess so. But I tend to think of these as almost mutually exclusive groups. You know, it's certainly not the kind of thing that would be like a selling point for your whole machine. And all the way around, a machine like this to me has a problem, and that problem is, why don't I just use a PC? You know, historically there's like several things that make a console different anyway than a PC. Better. I always felt I liked consoles, but different for sure. Like, for example, way back in the day, you had to install games on PC, and it was a pain in the ass. Like, you would go into like your DOS window and type in these command lines, and you could totally fuck it up, and then your game wouldn't run right, and you'd had to undo it all and start over again. You know, and consoles didn't have that. You put the game in, you press power, it's turned on and played. Voila. You know, that was a lot better. Well, that's not like that now, because on the one hand, PC's got a lot easier to use. You know, now you just click install, and it installs, and you're done. Meanwhile, consoles got harder to use. You have to install games on consoles now, too. Back in the day, PC games had like all these... They were much more prone to like bugs and like fatal error bugs. Like, you know, your PC would crash. The whole game would just seize up, and that was pretty uncommon on a cartridge console. You know, like my Sega Genesis, I almost never encountered like a game-breaking bug that just like froze up the whole system. And, you know, PC games had problems with that, and you had to download patches and stay up to date if you had the, you know, current version of the game that had fixed all the stuff. That was like a whole layer of stuff to worry about that consoles didn't have. But consoles totally have that now. So it's like, well, there's no advantage there. Back in the day, PC interface, like the controller interface, was, in my opinion, much worse. You had mouse and keyboard, which I've never liked. Sorry. I know some people are really big fans of mouse and keyboard, but I never liked it. I always preferred a gamepad, and gamepads were not standardized at all on PC, so you had no way of knowing, or it was very difficult sometimes to know if a given game was going to work with the gamepad you had, and the gamepads themselves weren't very good. Like, they just didn't have a very good kind of feel or quality in like a tactile sense. And NES games, and you know, the designers knew that you were going to have a certain controller, and they were able to design the whole game around using that controller to the best ability that they had. And this was true, you know, for gaming all the way up through the 90s or whatever. But now PC games increasingly do have a standard controller, and it's the Xbox controller. The literally exact same controller you would be using on your home console. So that's been changed. Another thing that used to be really different was like the actual type of game. Like on PC, you had a lot of shooters, RTS games, and you had a certain kind of Western RPG, very kind of a dungeon crawly, point-and-clicky game like a Diablo or Baldur's Gate or something like that. But on consoles, in contrast, you had a bigger variety of games. You had fighting games, you had platformers, you had JRPGs, you had, you know, racing games, you had puzzle games like Tetris or something like that. You know, you had this like breadth of games, all these different characters and all this stuff, whereas I always felt like PC games were much more kind of one note. It was always like the guy with the gun, you know. Of course there was always a slightly different story behind it, but really it was just, you know, it was Doom, 100 different versions of Doom, and then it was Command and Conquer like 20 times, and then it was like Baldur's Gate or Diablo or something 20 times, and then you had like online games and stuff. But it always seemed to me like there's just a whole different type of game on console. But I've really observed over the last 10 years or so the rise of kind of Western developers to where they really dominate the console space now. And now consoles are mostly shooters and Western RPGs. And JRPGs barely get made, and the ones that do get made are like poorly made because they're having to cut corners and you know, do all this stuff to try and make them profitable. 3D like platformers, like, you know, like proper platformers as sort of like a modern big budget title basically don't exist. Like, I think Nintendo is the only people who still make like 3D platformers. That new Sly game came out on the PlayStation 3 and got ignored. What a waste. You know, it's like the whole industry is sort of collapsing towards it's as though PCs and consoles are merging. And this being the case, why would I buy this console instead of just sticking with Steam? I mean, this thing is bound to cost like $500. I bet you anything. And I already have a nice computer that's perfectly adequate, and I could just play Steam, and it's going to be like 99% the exact same games. All the indie games and things like that I think are cool, that I care about, are going to wind up on Steam. No one's going to make things exclusive to Xbox Live anymore. What? Why? You know, it's like this isn't even for games, really. It just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, I kind of look at it, and this is what I mean when I just say the whole thing feels like it's not intended for me anymore. It's for like a completely different kind of consumer. And, you know, I guess I don't really care. I mean, on the one hand, I kind of feel like that's unfortunate. It would be nice if it was awesome. But I also feel kind of like I already don't have enough money to buy everything anymore anyway, like I used to do, so it's okay. I let you go. So that's basically what my reaction to this reveal is this is Microsoft basically saying we're not for you, and me basically saying, well, I'm okay with that. So, like, adios, Microsoft, Xbox, and I sincerely doubt that there are going to be any games exclusive to your system that I'm going to be sorry to be missing. Although I should reserve judgment until E3, where they're supposedly going to reveal like 15 exclusive games, including 8 new IPs, That's pretty impressive. So we'll see what that is. Conceivably, at the end of the day, it's all about games. So if there are really great games, any platform could be saved by the software if the software is really great. But if the software is not amazing, I guess what I'm trying to say is the software would have to be really, really amazing to make me want to buy one of these at this point. I don't know. What do you think, Paisanos? Am I way off base? I've been looking at general internet reaction, and I think most people are going to say that they're probably agreeing with me. It seems like, but I don't know. By all means, comment and tell me how I'm wrong or whatever. Anyway, until next time, Paisanos.